There's a pattern in women over 50 that almost nobody talks about, honestly. It doesn't show up on a medical chart and no one diagnoses it. Somewhere along the way, they learned that life worked better because they made themselves smaller. I want to show you exactly how that happened, and more importantly, how it starts to change. If we're just meeting, I'm Dr. Linda, retired educator and nonprofit leader, and a woman in her 60s who's rebuilt her life more than once. Let me ask you something. Have you ever said yes when everything in you was saying no? Not because you wanted to, not because you had the energy, but because the idea of someone being disappointed in you felt worse than the exhaustion of doing the thing. Or have you ever had something important to say at a meeting, at a family dinner, in a conversation with someone you love, and you swallowed it because you didn't want to start something, because it wasn't worth the conflict, or because keeping the peace mattered more than your speaking the truth? If that sounds familiar, I need you to hear this clearly. You didn't develop this pattern because you're weak. You developed it because you were taught to. And here's what that teaching looked like. Be polite. Keep the peace. Don't take up too much space. Be easy to be around. These weren't lessons anyone delivered in a formal conversation. They came from watching, from subtle feedback, from the quiet approval you received when you made yourself smaller, and the friction you felt when you didn't. And over time, these lessons became beliefs. Those beliefs became behavior, and that behavior became a habit so deeply wired that it no longer feels like a choice. It just feels like who you are. But it isn't who you are. It's who you were trained to be. And there's a difference. Here's why this pattern becomes so hard to break. Most women think the problem is behavior. I need to speak up more. I need stronger boundaries. I need to stop overcommitting. But behavior is only the surface. Underneath the behavior is a belief. My value comes from keeping other people comfortable. And underneath that belief is usually a fear. If I stop complying, people may stop accepting me. That's the layer running everything, which is why so many intelligent women know exactly what they should do and still freeze in the moment they need to do it. And there are two myths that keep this cycle alive. The first myth is that being good means being agreeable. But it doesn't. Agreeable means I adjust to avoid friction. Good means I act with honesty and integrity. And those are not the same thing. And when women confuse the two, they end up performing goodness while abandoning truth. The second myth is that speaking up makes you difficult. No, the women I've seen break this pattern didn't become difficult. They just became clear and honest. And those are very different things. Now here's the real cost of staying trapped inside those myths. I call it fake peace. Fake peace is when everything looks calm on the surface, but underneath, resentment is building. You say yes when you mean no. You smooth things over. You avoid conflict at all costs. You keep everyone comfortable. And slowly, almost invisibly, you disappear inside your own life. Because every time you abandon your honesty to preserve comfort, you reinforce the same message internally. My needs matter less. And repeated long enough, that message becomes an identity. And I want to say something important. If part of you has been feeling irritated while listening to this, good. Not because irritation feels good, but because irritation is often the first sign that your honesty is becoming louder than your conditioning. You're not becoming selfish or harsh or difficult. You're becoming honest. And change begins with honesty. Here's what the turning point usually looks like. Not some dramatic confrontation. Usually it's much quieter than that. A pause before saying yes. A moment where you suddenly realize, I actually don't want to do this. A conversation where someone crosses a line, and instead of immediately smoothing it over, you notice the tension in your body. A moment where the old automatic response no longer feels automatic. That hesitation matters because it means something inside you is waking up. I worked with a woman, I'll call her Caroline, who had spent decades being the dependable one. Everyone relied on her. Everyone called her. Everyone assumed she would handle things. And one night at a family dinner, Her brother asked her to take on something she'd already told herself she needed a break from. And for the first time, she said, "I can't do that this time. You'll need to ask someone else." That was it. No speech, no drama, and no apology. And later she told me that was the hardest sentence I'd said in years. That's the shift. Not a revolution, just a sentence. And once women start practicing that honesty, something changes. They stop apologizing before they've even spoken. They stop over-explaining every decision, and they stop carrying responsibilities that no one asked them to carry. And slowly, they begin choosing clarity over approval. Now, let me be honest with you. At first, this feels uncomfortable, sometimes even wrong, because when you've spent decades being rewarded for self-abandonment, honesty can initially feel selfish. But here's what I've seen happen repeatedly. The relationships built on mutual respect get stronger, and the people who genuinely value you adjust. And the energy you've been leaking for years begins to come back, not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you stop spending yourself on things that are draining the life out of you. So how do you actually begin breaking this pattern? Not perfectly, not overnight, but practically. Here are 5 places to start. First, notice where you shrink, not with judgment, just awareness. Where do you automatically apologize? Where do you soften your opinions before anyone challenges them? Where do you make yourself smaller without even realizing it? Second, practice honesty in small amounts, not the hardest conversations first. Start simple. Say what restaurant you actually want to go to. Say what opinion you actually have. Build the muscle in low-stakes moments. Third, choose discomfort over resentment, because resentment is usually delayed honesty. The discomfort of truth passes and the exhaustion of silence compounds. And fourth, stop over-explaining your no. A boundary does not need a courtroom defense. "I'm not able to do that" is a complete sentence. And finally, start asking yourself one question regularly. Am I doing this because I truly want to, or because I'm afraid of what happens if I don't? That question exposes almost everything. Let me ask you something directly. Which one of these 5 felt the most uncomfortable? Because the one that made you tense up, that's probably the one that's costing you the most right now. Leave the number in the comments. Not because you owe anyone vulnerability, but because women in this community need to see they're not the only ones working through this. Okay, now, if you've been following my videos, you know I'm not going to let you just watch this and go back to your day. This week, I want you to try one thing, one moment, that's all. One moment where you would normally shrink, and choose differently. No long speech, no dramatic confrontation, calm tone, just one honest sentence, said calmly without apology. Then silence, because this pattern rarely breaks in one giant moment. It breaks in small, honest decisions, repeated consistently over time. Now, if this conversation resonated with you, your next step is getting clear on where you actually are in your reinvention process. Some of you are just beginning to recognize these patterns, while others are already trying to break them. And those are 2 very different stages. I created a short next chapter quiz that will help you identify exactly where you are and what your next steps should be. And after that, download the free Reinvention Roadmap. It includes practical tools and language to help you begin making these shifts in real life without blowing up the relationships that matter to you. Both links are below. Start with a quiz and then let the roadmap guide what comes next. And before you go, let me tell you about the next video, because once women stop shrinking, they usually hit another problem immediately. They know they want to respond differently, but they don't know what to say in the moment. Somebody asks too much of them or crosses a boundary and pushes again, and they freeze. Not because they failed, but because nobody ever taught them the language to use. So in the next video, I'm giving you 7 exact boundary scripts you can start using immediately. Real phrases for real situations in a way that still sounds like you. And there's one script in particular that changes the dynamic almost instantly. If boundaries are where you struggle, that video is going to help a lot. It drops on Thursday, so before you go, be sure to hit subscribe so it comes directly to you. Because the ability to speak honesty without guilt, That changes more than most women realize. Don't waste your time trying to be who you were in your 20s and 30s. Be who you are now. I'm Dr. Linda, and I'll see you in the next video.